All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our BCBA practice question series, where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. 2 graduate students plan to improve their study habits this semester. They each set a goal to study for 1 hour every night and use an app on their phone to track their progress. After 3 weeks, they take their data and notice that they are averaging around 1 hour of studying per night. What tactic are these students using? So we're looking at a strategy or intervention or tactic question, and we're looking specifically at the students' tactics. What do we know so far? We know these students are trying to improve study habits. They set a goal for 1 hour. So their criterion is 1 hour every night, and then they track their progress. When they evaluate their data, they see they've just about hit 1 hour of studying per night. So we're looking at some sort of self-management here, given they're setting their own goals, they're tracking their data using their own apps, and they're evaluating themselves. So what tactic have they used? A, self-monitoring. Have they self-monitored their habits? They have. They have this app that is tracking their progress. They're monitoring their own behavior. Now, A looks good, but we always read every single answer choice. Have they used B, self-talk? Nowhere in this question do we see any sort of self-talking or self-prompting, so self-talk doesn't apply. What about C, self-evaluation? Well, they are evaluating themselves. After 3 weeks, they look at their data, compare it to the set criterion, which is an hour, and notice they're averaging around an hour of studying per night. So they've taken their self-monitored data to self-evaluate their progress. So the tactic they're using is both A and C. With self-management questions, you just want to go through and evaluate what is each person doing for their own behavior. Are they monitoring their data? Are they talking themselves through the response? And then are they evaluating that data against a preset criterion? A behavior analyst is providing services to a client whose family is from a different cultural background. The family requests that a traditional cultural practice be incorporated into the client's behavior intervention plan. The behavior analyst is unfamiliar with the practice and is unsure if it aligns with evidence-based practices. What is the most appropriate course of action moving forward? All right, we have a cultural responsiveness question. As analysts, we need to be responsive to different cultures that might be different than our own. What do we know so far? We know this analyst is providing these services, different cultural background, and the family wants this traditional cultural practice to be incorporated into the plan. So immediately we're thinking, all right, the stakeholders are clearly part of the team. They need to be part of the treatment planning, but we also want to remain ethical and we want to use science and evidence-based practices. So it's a balancing act between just letting everything the stakeholders want incorporated into the plan while also remaining empirical and evidence-based. In this case, the analyst is unfamiliar with this practice and isn't sure if it's evidence-based. So what should they do going forward? A, explain the practice cannot be included since it is not evidence-based. Well, not so fast, right? That's a pretty strong answer because we still need to be culturally responsive. And even if this cultural practice isn't what we might consider evidence-based, is there a way we can still incorporate it into our treatment to remain empirical and evidence-based? So B, include the practice without question to respect the family's cultural preferences. Being culturally responsive and being understanding of the different cultures you're going to encounter doesn't mean you have to say yes to everything. At the end of the day, you are still in charge. You're still responsible for this case. So just agreeing to everything is not at all the right practice. C, investigate the cultural practice and review literature to determine if the practice can be ethically included in the plan. Yes, it's now your job to understand better what is this cultural practice? Can I incorporate it? And is there enough backing, right, justification to include that practice ethically in my plan? If I can, that's fantastic. Let's go ahead and do that. And then D, transfer the case to another analyst who is more familiar with this culture. Well, that's not always an option. It's usually not an option. As a current behavior analyst, it's our job to educate ourselves on these things. That's your entire role, right? Design treatments that are going to effectively meet the socially valid needs of your stakeholders. And part of that is incorporating cultural practices into your behavior plans. But you want to remain ethical, you want to remain empirical. So finding that balance is key as a modern behavior analyst. A 4-year-old is learning to consistently wash their hands after using the restroom at school. Upon observation, it appears the 4-year-old only washes their hands when they see the sign that says, "Wash your hands in the bathroom." If the sign is not there, then hands are not washed. What is the sign acting as? So we're looking at the sign, which is a stimulus. So what kind of stimulus is this sign? Well, we know the 4-year-old is learning this behavior, but it seems they only wash their hands when they see the sign. Now, if the sign is what's evoking that behavior, then what is that sign acting as? A, an abolishing operation. Well, an abolishing operation is typically decreasing the value of a consequence, and it's going to have an abative effect, meaning it's going to temporarily reduce behavior. The sign is clearly not temporarily reducing the behavior. If anything, it's increasing the behavior because when the sign is seen, the behavior occurs. So it doesn't appear to be an abolishing operation. It absolutely appears to be some sort of discriminative stimulus. It is evoking this response of washing hands. It's more than likely at some point the client, or the 4-year-old, I should say, was reinforced for washing hands in the presence of that sign. Now the sign acts as the SD. And you might say, well, this could be a prompt. Maybe, but a prompt is just a temporary SD. And at this time, the sign is the SD. Now, they probably don't want the sign to always be the SD because you just want the 4-year-old to wash their hands, sign or no sign. But at this current time, that sign is acting as the discriminative stimulus. Now let's look at C and D. You should eliminate these quickly. Why? Well, it's not the consequence. The sign isn't the consequence. The sign is evoking this response. And then the consequence is whatever happens following the hand washing response. So what is the sign acting as, given that it's evoking the behavior? It is currently the discriminative stimulus. After developing a new intervention plan, a behavior analyst schedules a meeting with the client's family to review the plan and gather their opinions. The analyst wants to ensure that the intervention's goals and methods are seen as important and applicable to the family's daily life. Which aspect of the intervention is the analyst focusing on by gathering the family's feedback? So the question is asking about the aspect of the intervention. Okay, and so it's looking at the family's feedback. Well, what is the analyst asking of the family? Well, they've scheduled a meeting to gather opinions on the intervention's goals and methods, and are they important and applicable to families' daily life? Now, stop there, right? As you get better and better, we should start trying to predict answer choices. Okay, it's going to start making you really think critically about the question, and it's going to slow you down so you're not rushing to answer choices. If we're talking about goals and methods that are important and applicable to the daily life, what does that sound like to me? Well, to me, it sounds like these are meaningful goals. And when we talk about meaningful goals and outcomes, we're talking about social validity. So let's look at A, treatment fidelity. Treatment fidelity is how well and how accurately and how consistently the treatment is implemented as written. Well, here we're talking about importance and how applicable it is to the daily life, not necessarily the implementation. So really what we're looking at is the social validity. The analyst wants to better understand the social validity of these intervention goals and methods. Are they important? Are they meaningful? Do they apply? Do they make a difference? Observer drift has to do with measurement, and over time, who's ever doing the measurement tends to observe things that aren't necessarily what they intend to measure, or they're observing different behaviors. We're not talking about observer drift here. We're not talking about measurement issues. And then procedural integrity is just another way to say treatment fidelity. And we're not discussing treatment fidelity here. We're discussing the importance, the meaningfulness of these goals and methods. We're discussing the social validity of these interventions, goals, and methods. After implementing a token economy for a couple of weeks with your client, you decide that you want to use a schedule that typically produces a high, steady rate of responding with minimal pauses after reinforcement. What schedule would you likely use? Very straightforward reinforcement schedule question, written in a way to try to throw you off. So we're looking at the schedule, and our schedule is a schedule that produces high, steady rates of responding and minimal pauses after reinforcement. So if we're looking at high, steady rates of responding, we're looking at variable schedules, because with variable schedules, we can't predict when reinforcement is coming, so we have to keep responding. With fixed schedules, you can predict reinforcement, so typically you see longer pauses. So if we have high, steady rates of responding and minimal pauses, what schedule are we likely using? A concurrent schedule. Well, a concurrent schedule is a compound schedule, meaning there are two or more schedules in play. But with a concurrent schedule, a compound schedule can feature two fixed schedules, maybe, right? So we can't just assume it's a concurrent schedule. What we can say, though, is a variable ratio. A variable ratio schedule produces high steady rates of responding and minimal pauses after reinforcement. Why it's considered the strongest for maintenance and generalization, where you're trying to generalize or maintain an already established behavior. Because with a variable ratio, you're never predicting when reinforcement, or the learner isn't predicting when reinforcement is coming, so they have to keep responding even after reinforcement. With a fixed ratio, you can predict, or the learner can predict reinforcement, so there's typically a longer pause after reinforcement is delivered. And then tandem schedule, it's the same as A, it's a compound schedule. There can be multiple fixed schedules, there can be variable schedules. It's just not what we're looking for if we're just simply trying to produce a high steady rate of responding with minimal pauses. If that's what we're going for, we're probably going to use a variable ratio schedule. Thank you for watching. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. We'll see you soon.